Hello and welcome to the Oliver Smith Elector Orientation. Today is August 8th, 2023. I'm Carol Gray. I'm the Oliver Smith Elector from Amherst, and I'll let you both introduce yourselves. Lily?
I'm Lily Dwight. I'm the elector from Deerfield.
Waskett, the elector from Williamsburg.
Okay. And Dick and I are at the Forbes Library. Okay, we're going to jump right in, and I'm going to share screen and share a PowerPoint to get us started. Moment here. Great. Starting at the beginning. Just a moment.
You can edit, I think, the video so that you can take them.
You can edit. Yes, here we are. Thank you for your patience. Okay. All right. Okay, so Oliver Smith was going to give a little bit of history, and he was born in Hatfield on January 20th, 1766. So we're going to start with him as the beginning of the orientation, and I want to tell you a little bit of resources that you can read more about Oliver Smith. There's various articles about him, and I discovered at the Hatfield Library that they have several publications there, including a transcript of the great trial that I will tell you about with oral arguments, and it's very exciting, and as well as some typed up old documents about his early life there. So he was the uncle of Sophia Smith, who was the founder of Smith College. And the house that is said to be his birthplace also has a plaque on it saying it was her birthplace. What's not clear to me is whether they both were born in the same house, which is possible. Perhaps Oliver Smith's brother inherited the house. Anyway, right next to that house in Hatfield is a beautiful mansion that was built by Sophia Smith herself. It's privately owned now. Oliver Smith lived in Hatfield, and he was, I'm skipping ahead to his memorial, his monument, which is also in the cemetery in Hatfield. But to tell you a little bit about his background, he was the youngest of 6 boys. His father died when he was only 18 months old, and he had 3 brothers who went to the Revolutionary War. His mother died in 1807, and his father left an estate worth 2,000 pounds, and he shared, and Oliver Smith's share of the estate was 266 pounds, which was about $1,175 back in 1791. And Oliver Smith was a very prudent investor. He bought land and cattle, and he bought the 10-acre farm from his 5 brothers for $170. He also invested in land out of the Massachusetts area. Connecticut was selling the Western Reserves lands to the Connecticut Land Company, and Oliver Smith was a shareholder in that company. And the state of Connecticut was selling this land to raise money for a school fund. And Oliver Smith bought 1,000 acres, and he also bought acres in Northampton and Cleveland, Ohio. The Connecticut Land Company that he was a shareholder from, when they bought land from the state of Connecticut, they bought it for 30 cents an acre. Later, when he sold 590 acres, they sold it for $10,844. A total of $20 per acre. So he was an amazing investor. He was also known to be a fair financial person with friends as well. He started loaning money to neighbors. He was a banker and a money lender. One quote was, "His personal reputation was fair and high." He became the director of the Northampton Bank, and he was regularly seen with his green wagon and gray horse going through town. Interestingly, he never married, but he did have a relationship with a young woman named Roxana Graves of Hatfield. And he would often visit her after sundown, which was said to be the same as an engagement to visit a woman after sundown. So he was meeting her after sundown every Sunday for a long period of time. But apparently she got tired of waiting for him to propose, because she ultimately married another. And this happened after Oliver Smith's mother died. Oliver Smith then moved in with his brother, I guess, instead of proposing to Roxana. And Roxana then decided it's time to marry another. So she married Charles Starkweather, and they had 5 children together. And he was a widower. Actually, so he already had 5 children. And Oliver Smith didn't visit her again until after her husband had died 35 years later. Oliver Smith was very active in the community and in public service. He was appointed to be a justice of the peace in 1811. He was a delegate to the Massachusetts State Convention in 1820. And this was the convention for revising the Massachusetts Constitution. He attended almost every session of the 2-month convention, and he received $135 for travel and salary. He was the treasurer of the Hatfield South Center District Schoolhouse Building Committee. In 1824, he was voted a presidential elector from Franklin District. He became Hatfield's first state representative to Boston in 1827. His voting record, there's a little bit known about his voting record, which is quite interesting. He voted against government aid to private business, but for lower taxes for the woolen industry. So it seems that might be saying that he thought businesses should manage their own affairs and pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, but don't let the government take too much of your money when you earn it. He was in the state legislature for only 2 years, and he then became the Hampshire County's highway commissioner. He was involved with the Hatfield Church, but he left in protest because he didn't think that they should get heat in the building. They wanted to have stoves, and he was against that. And so Hatfield in 1830 did indeed add 2 stoves to their church, but they lost Oliver Smith in the process. He resigned. Anyway, so he died and left this amazing will. And I'm going to tell you more about the will. You can see here, you can go and visit this cemetery plot. It's very prominent. You can see on the left that his monument is surrounded by what looks like were frameworks for a railing, perhaps like a wrought iron railing of some sort. And his dates are right there when he died. He died in the mid-1800s. And he left an amazing will. So the will is what set up Smith Charities and set up the whole framework for you all to be electors. And but there was a great trial that came out of the will, because Oliver Smith's family didn't want his money going to Smith Charities. They wanted it to go to them. And they did get some of the money. By the way, Sophia Smith, the money that she had to found Smith College, it's probable that a good chunk of that actually did come from Oliver Smith, because he did leave money to her and other family members, but he left a huge chunk to Smith Charities, and was a founder of Smith Charities. And you may have noticed that's on his monument, founder of Smith Charities. And so this trial evolved where his relatives who wanted to inherit his money sued and tried to say that that will that set up Smith Charities was invalid. And the way that they approached that is, first of all, great lawyers were brought in. So Rufus Choate was the lawyer representing the Smith descendants, and Daniel Webster represented Smith Charities, and the will itself. So Smith Charities was still being founded if this will went through. And so these 2 great lawyers, both of whom served in the Massachusetts state legislature, were head to head. And this trial was quite an amazing affair. So the trial hinged on whether the 2 people who were witnesses for Oliver Smith's will, as was required by law, was one of them not really lucid enough to be a witness? Was he not competent to have witnessed that will? And was the will therefore improper and not legal? And the way the trial turned out was that one of the person who was one of the witnesses, his name was Theophilus Phelps. He actually has a history of mental health issues. And he had actually spent time in an insane asylum. So perhaps Oliver Smith could have chosen a better person, but he was also a lawyer and he was close to Oliver Smith. And so then the question was a battle of medical experts. Was Theophilus Phelps insane, or was he competent? And so they brought. There's a very interesting book which I'll show you when I'm done with the PowerPoint that talks about the testimony in the trial. And so one doctor, Dr. Woodward, testified that Theophilus was, quote, feeble, distressed, anxious, and fearful in August of 1843. And he complained of dyspeptic symptoms of uncomfortable feelings in his head, not exactly a headache, but an oppression, and was subject to a rush of blood in the head. And that he thought that he was having delusions and constitutes a form of insanity. Another doctor, and Dr. Woodward concluded, I could not say that he was insane at the time of the execution of the will. He may have had lucid intervals, but his whole history shows an unsound state. And then Dr. Timothy Gridley comes in and he says, in my judgment, Theophilus was not a man of unsound mind. There was nothing that I saw, which as a medical man, I could say indicated insanity. I considered the digestive organs the primary cause of the evil. Then Dr. Luther Bell comes from the McLean Asylum in Boston and said, in his opinion, Theophilus was, quote, equal to such a transaction as the attestation of a will in July 1844. And then another witness, Dr. Isaac Roy, said, I have no hesitation in saying that Theophilus P. Phelps was perfectly competent to attest to the will. All this testimony amounted to 15 to 20 hours of testimony before a jury in 2 days of court sessions, and ultimately the court upheld the will. So, and you can read all about it in a book on that very trial. Okay, moving forward. So the will survives, and it sets up these gifts. And as electors, you will read all about what these gifts are, but basically there's a gift to brides, to nurses, tradespeople, and to widows. And the amount is determined by the trustees, and the electors can weigh in, and we'll explain more about those roles. And in the building, you can, if you go up to the second floor, and I encourage you to go exploring this amazing building, you'll see that these records go back 170 plus years. It's really quite amazing. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of introductions. So Lily's going to talk about the role of trustees, and you, of course, all know that you are electors, but we have a broader team as well. So Janelle Dodds is a pro bono attorney who represents various charities, including us. And as an elector, if you ever have a question or a concern, you have a right to talk to this lawyer, and here's her contact information. We also have an accountant. His name is Joe Wolkowitz, and here's his contact information. He has 25 plus years of experience, and both he and the attorney are part of a larger firm that's very well respected in our area. And if you have a question about the finances or the accounting, you can talk to our accountant. Here's his contact information. One thing that you will be reviewing as electors is the tax form called the 990. This is a form that's filed by every charity once a year, and it says right on the form that the form has been shown to the governing body. That's you. So you'll receive a copy of this form, and even though you're not an accountant, it's still good to read through this and just be aware of what our finances are. And if you ever have a question about what's in this document, you can contact the president or a trustee or the accountant, him or herself. Okay, moving forward. So on the topic of the gifts, so the amount of gifts has changed over the years, Carla Cohn, our staff person, did research on what they had been historically. So in 1935, the widows received $50. And then from 57 to 79, they were at 100. At one point, they were at $200. And by the way, these are gifts for the children of widows. If you have children under 18, you get this gift for each child. As a trustee, Lily and I were trustees together last year. We doubled the widow's gift. So now widows get 600 for the first child, and then they get 300 for each child after that. The brides also, that gift has increased. In the early 1930s, it was $50, then it was $100, and last year we doubled that to $200. But really, these gifts can go up more. If there are adequate funds, trustees could decide to double them yet again. It is our mission to give to these gifts. It's part of our charitable mission. So if funds allow, we could double these gifts again. So another part of what you may encounter as when you become a trustee is Community Preservation Act funds, which are given away by each town, but Northampton in particular has been very generous with us because the Smith Charities building is right here in Northampton. And basically, trustees or electors can file an application to try to receive funds that are for historic preservation in the town of Northampton. But even Hatfield and could be your town as well, could get funds by applying to your town for CPA funds to help restore our wonderful building. Now, here's a little about what our wonderful building looks like. I encourage you to tour it. If you haven't already done that, walk around. The basement is amazing. It looks like it's straight out of Hogwarts. You can see on the right here, there's a wooden rake. I love the wooden rake. Anyway, so you see that it's right there. Yeah, it's all made of wood. And it's just an amazing building. And then this is what it used to look like. You can see there used to be wrought iron columns, bars, like straight out of the Gringotts Bank in Harry Potter. And this is the vault, which is still used. This is still where mortgages and other important papers are kept. Here's so back to the Community Preservation Act. So they've been meeting online. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that process is. Here's a meeting that Dave Murphy, our president, attended, and I'm there as well. And when you go to apply for Community Preservation Act funds, they have a little hearing, and you must go to that hearing to advocate for your funds and try to get other people who are electors to come, and even people from the community, because it's community support that helps get those funds. And this past year, we got over $400,000 to fix up the exterior of the building. Now one of the things the CPA wanted was for our CPA stands for Community Preservation Act Committee. They wanted to have our building be more accessible to the public. And so this year we've held open houses last week, and we're having another one tomorrow to invite the public to come to our premises. And I emailed Sarah LaValle, the development person, and the person who's a liaison from the town of Northampton with the Historic Commission and the CPA. And I said, please invite them, special invitation. So when we go to apply for more funds this fall, they know that we really are making efforts to have the building be accessible. And 1 hour open house is very easy to do. I hope that it will continue, and you could do a couple every summer, and it's fun and interesting. And the person who came last week was absolutely enthralled with the building. Okay, so how do you file a CPA grant? Well, you first file an eligibility form. It's a very straightforward form, 1 page. All the forms are online. And then you file the application itself. And even if you have no experience with this, they walk you through it all. You could do it. And it's really a great way to get funds for our organization. Here's a sample of the application I did for last year. Here's from the historic Northampton website. Smith Charities is a building in the design of the Victorian Renaissance. It was designed by a local architect. As you know, Oliver Smith left the will in 1845, and this tells more about it. There's some lovely old pictures of how, and this building was part of the Northampton Historic District. So this is part of why we qualify for grants, both from the city, but also Massachusetts has historic grants, and we've gotten 50 to 80,000 in the last couple of years for restoration work. We also have a preservation plan that was designed by the Jones Wissett architects. This fall, we'll be filing a new application for CPA funds to renew this plan. It was done in 2018, and we need more current numbers, and we need to factor in all the work that's already been done. So the CPA already said that they would support something like this. So we're going to ask for probably 10 or 15,000 to update this plan. And this plan is all available. You can ask Carla for it. You can get the whole PDF emailed to you. So we've had work done by Structures North. I'm just going to quickly tick through the presentation that I gave to the CPA, so you can see what kind of presentation you could do if you file a grant. And they want to know, are we applying for other grants too? So there's another grant I'm going to apply for this fall from Mass Historic Preservation. They do matching grants. And here, if you're filing a CPA grant, you want to have the cost estimates. So you'd ask the architects, please provide an estimate so you can attach this to your application. And we were seeking 349,000, and we got that full amount of money. And here are areas that were being restored. Here's pictures of how the stone was looking, and we're fixing it all up. And the chimney is also going to be replaced. We had architectural drawings, and I'll let you pause this and read it on your own if you choose to, and I'll keep going because we have a short amount of time. We are doing restoration work on the roof, and ticking forward, we had a nice letter from the Northampton Historic Commission talking about how they value our building as a historic building in Northampton. And that's the end of my screen sharing. And I'm going to now turn it over to Lily, and she's going to talk about what is the role of a trustee, how are the trustees selected, and what's the role of electors, and also what do we do at trustee meetings. There you go, Lily, take it away.
Yeah, I got it all. Hi, everybody. Lily Dwight from Deerfield again. When you're elected an elector, you're representing your town. And it was decided a few years ago to rotate the responsibility of being a trustee. A trustee serves for 2 years and then rotates out. Last year, because everybody's election schedules are different and things like that, what we finally settled on is that a town is actually represented by a trustee. And so the trustee may not be the same person 2 years in a row, but the town will be operating as a trustee. The trustees have the responsibility of meeting once a month. They evaluate the mortgage rates. They evaluate, so they might reset them or leave them alone. They discuss things like the CPA application and provide support around that. They review the financials. They review the gifts that have been identified, that Carla, the administrator, manages the applications and brings them forth to the trustees. The trustees review them with Carla and then decide on awarding the gifts. They can also set the gift values. In other words, something I don't think Carol touched on, but the money available. Oliver Smith declared that there would be no investments in like the stock market or anything like that. So the money available for gifts comes directly from the mortgage payments that go out. So based on what the income is, the monthly income is, that's how you project on what you can set for the gifts for the different grant types. So it's important to look at what applications, what mortgages will be finishing, so that you'll have to go get new ones, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, you can have a pretty stable sense of what for the next year, what you can set the gifts at. You can also reset them the next month, should something happen. So that's part of your responsibility, is to manage the disbursement and to make sure that we are actually meeting our goal of being a charitable institution. Let's see, what else? What have I forgotten?
Lily, you've done a great job publicizing the gifts and the mortgages in your community.
Okay.
Could you talk about that?
Yes, so a very important part of being an elector and a trustee is to promote Smith Charities in your community. I'm sure that you know what it is, but I'm sure that in your town, a lot of people see that name on the ballot and they just check it off and they go, I don't know what an elector under the will of Oliver Smith is. And that is certainly the case in Deerfield. So what I have done, Deerfield, the town of Deerfield has a Facebook group. So I post on that. And I've also created a Deerfield Oliver Smith page where I post things like the open house, and I'll post that on Deerfield Now as well. I find that Facebook is a really good way to actually reach a lot of people. In addition, Carla prints off flyers that you probably got or will get if you haven't gotten them yet, that you can bring to the guidance counselors in high schools. You can put them in, I put them in the town hall. There's a table for all kinds of flyers there, and talk to various community associations to put the flyers up as well. What else?
And I'll just supplement that too. And really advertising these gifts is one of the main things electors need to do, because we don't have enough people applying. And I have been trying very hard and haven't gotten a lot of bites, but here's some other things that I tried. So we have scans of each of the flyers for widows, brides, tradespeople, nurses, and mortgages. There's a scan for each of those. So I've been submitting those scans to the superintendent's newsletter for the school system. I had a son in the high school, and so they were printing these flyers as part of the school newsletter. And I did get a response from somebody who was a widow, but they didn't qualify exactly. They have to be married, and they weren't married. Anyway, and another thing is I go to the public library, and I took a cereal box and I put a bunch of the flyers that have there's one flyer that I showed you earlier in the PowerPoint that has all the different types of gifts. And I put that a bunch of copies of it in a cereal box that I cover with a flyer, and I hang it in the library, and you could hang it in the senior center. But basically, I even did outreach to churches and to funeral parlors, trying to tell the ministers, please share this information with your congregations and funeral parlors. You must know widows. So be creative. Approach anybody, everybody. There's also an annual visit that Carla does, and an elector could go with her or do it instead of her, to Smith Vocational School. Lily, do you want to talk about what the role is with Smith Vocational with Smith Charities?
Well, Smith Voc was started by Smith Charities, and there is a special component of the funds that gets dispersed to Smith Voc every year. And I mean, it has a lot to do with Oliver Smith's values, I guess. Yeah. I don't know what else you want me to say about that, but but one thing I will say is that another thing that the trustees might need to be considering as the world turns, in the past, we have modified it because it used to be very different about like who got the gifts, and we've expanded it to include nurses, because I think nurses didn't initially or something like that. But anyway, so there are ways to modify it and still stay within the spirit of the
yes, and
the world is changing, so it's worth bearing that in mind.
Absolutely. And for example, I'm looking at, we're talking now about, could we expand the age group, since we don't have enough people applying and we really need to do more to meet our charitable mission? Could we expand the ages to whatever we can do to try to enlarge the number of applicants? Yeah, that's great. Could you talk a little about the annual meeting? What happens with the annual meeting if you're an elector and if you're a trustee?
You put me on the spot. Well, at the annual meeting, there are a few meetings. First, the existing board meets to finalize the year's worth of work. That's the trustees. When I say board, I mean the trustees and the president. And then there is the meeting with the current electors to review the information from the trustees. Sometimes those are one in the same meeting. It depends what has to happen, but that's reviewing the financials and anything that's come up, the major changes. And Carla usually produces a book of everything that's happened and worth reviewing. And then that's followed by the meeting with the new electors. And so sometimes people will leave if they're no longer there. And the new electors come in, and the charge then is to elect the trustees and the president for the next year. And as I mentioned, that we've established a rotation that is strongly recommended, but clearly it's not a law, it's not a rule, but the idea is for fairness that every town gets represented doing the work of the trustees, because the trustees are financially compensated, which I think I failed to mention. It's not a huge amount. I can't remember what it is, like
It's $5,000. Currently, it's $5,000 for the president, and it's $2,000 for each of the two trustees. And the president serves as a trustee. So there's 3 trustees total. Historically, until just recently, the president was always one of the electors, but that wasn't required by the will. For like 70 plus years, that was the case. But the will actually allows there to be both trustees and a president that are not electors. And actually, when I went to read the original reports, the initial trustees were not electors. Interesting, yes. And by the way, these old reports are quite interesting. I ordered one online from the 100th anniversary, and not only learning the history and who was electors and who were trustees, but also the amounts given to charity. I was really struck by how the report in 1948 said that the payments to beneficiaries were 41,000, and we're now hovering around 10,000. We really need to do better on the charitable mission part. And so I really encourage future electors, take heed. Just because it's one thing today doesn't mean it has to be that. And perhaps if we don't have, they had many more applicants, but maybe we get more applicants by increasing the gifts and reducing our overhead too. Anyway, so yes, and so and those stipends that we just named, those are set by trustees. So you could set a lower stipend or you could set a higher stipend. And some people have donated back part of their stipend. So there are many options. And
the one other thing I would say about this rotation is that we currently have all agreed that if the president is an elector from a town whose rotation it is, then they will consider to be representing, and so the next town will rotate in. So that you can have, I mean, at any given point, you actually presumably can have 3 towns represented as trustee.
So just to break that down. So currently our president, David Murphy, is not an elector, but he is president. And there is an elector from Northampton. So you don't want to deprive the voters of having their opportunity to have their elected person rotate in as trustee. So it could be a situation where if Dave is still president and still not an elector, the Northampton elector will also serve her rotation for Northampton. So
no, I don't think so. But anyway, that's something that has to be figured out because because he's not an elector. I'm sorry.
Because he's not an elector.
Yes.
Right. And this is wonderful timing. So we're here to welcome Attorney Janelle Dodds. Thank you so much for joining us, Attorney Dodds, Janelle. So because you're taking time out of your day, I'm going to just let you jump right in, and then you can jump off. So if you could just introduce yourself and say, what your role is as an attorney when you represent nonprofits, and I guess I also mentioned before that people could contact you if they had questions. But go ahead, and if you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure. As Carol said, I'm Janelle Dodds. I'm a partner here at Bulkley, Richardson and Julinas in Springfield. I've been here for a little over 20 years, although saying that out loud makes me feel old. And I do a fair amount. I do sort of business and finance work. I do a fair amount of representing of banks and lenders in connection with financing transactions. I do some general corporate work and I do some other transactional things. And I have developed a little bit of a specialized expertise around here, at least in nonprofit work. So I do a lot of sort of just general corporate governance for nonprofits as well as nonprofit transactional type things. And it's advice to nonprofits and nonprofit board members on things like their bylaws, how and when they need AG approval for things.
AG is Attorney
and
General.
just sort of, Attorney General's approval for things, and just sort of, general corporate governance advice.
That's wonderful. And we are so grateful that Janelle is doing this pro bono for us. So she's helping our charitable mission, and she represents other nonprofits in the area, and she's got a wealth of expertise. And she comes with a firm that's also got, how many people in your firm, Janelle?
I am not sure. I should know that.
At least a dozen, I think, right?
More than 20, less than 40, somewhere in that region.
Yeah. So her firm has a lot of other expertise. And if we ever needed help with a particular issue that wasn't exactly in Janelle's skill set, we can have access to her firm as well. So Janelle, if people ever had a question, is it okay if they email you or call you?
Sure.
Great. All right. Well, is there, Janelle, you can hang out if you want and just listen, or we just wanted you to pop in to do a meet and greet. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. So we'll just keep going. And Lily, did you have more you wanted to say on the topic that we were just on?
No, I just wanted to make sure that people understood that trustees are chosen by the electors in that last meeting, and
Right.
and then in your first meeting of the year, or last meeting, the electors meet once a year, trustees meet once a month.
Exactly. And they can be
at
more
minimum, it seems like.
They sometimes we've met more frequently when we had more business to do, and we've done the meetings online since COVID. And what's helpful is we also have a recording of the meetings, and electors are welcome to come to meetings. So and sometimes people do, and I think that's a wonderful way to prepare for your role as trustee. So basically, you serve as an elector for about 4 or 5 years, and then you rotate into trustee, and you serve as trustee for 2 years if you keep getting elected from your town. So the idea being that you get familiar with the process. So by the time it's time to be a trustee, you understand how, more or less, how it works. And when you're a trustee, you don't really have to have any wealth of experience because everything gets explained to you. Carla comes, the staff person comes with the average mortgage rates from the banks in the area, and we usually vote for close to the average or a little under to make it enticing to get mortgages. Lily did an awesome job getting a mortgage for $800,000 by publicizing this in her community, which was wonderful. And so we decide the mortgage rates. We also approve gifts. So we, use Robert's rules, and I'll vote in favor of giving the gifts to this particular widow or that particular bride, etc. And we vote to apply for historic preservation grants and things of that sort. And also, this role is what you make of it. So you may have other ideas about things that this charity could be doing, ways that we could be more accessible to the public. Smith Charities is what the electors bring to it. So I really encourage people to think broadly. I want to talk for a moment about policies. We've just in the past year crafted 4 policies, and there could be others. I'm a lawyer in my prior career, now a professor. And so I worked on drafting policies based on templates we found online. So one policy is about retention of records. And by the way, you'll be given these policies. May I borrow your binder? I put together these binders, and Dick is here. By the way, I'm having the mic right in front of me, so it'll pick up my voice. But Dick is also here. And Dick, you can say
hi.
So sorry to have it just focused on me, but I want the mic to pick up. Anyway, there's this binder that has copies of all the policies as well as the will itself. So I really encourage people read the will. It's ancient, but it's interesting, and it's the document that established everything. So and I also encourage people read this book. So you'll be given a copy of this book if the tradition continues. Every elector has been given a copy of this book, and these are the lawyers from the famous trial. And it's fascinating. It includes actual snippets of testimony. In fact, what the doctor's testimony that I referenced earlier, it's all in this book. So it's a fascinating read. Anyway, so getting back to, so the policies are all in that binder that hopefully you'll receive a copy of. The retention of records basically just says this is a schedule by which we retain records. And as you saw from those pictures, we basically retain all our records. So we have records going back to literally the 1800s, and it's pretty amazing. You can go read these ancient records. It's really fascinating. We also have a whistleblower policy, a conflict of interest policy, and a policy on how to handle financial information. Now, the conflict of interest policy is important for every elector to know about because it basically says that if you have some kind of a business interest that in any way overlaps with your role as a trustee or an elector, you have to disclose that. And you have to, and every person has to sign a conflict of interest form that says you've read this policy. So when you start as an elector, you need to sign that form, and you have to sign it every single year as an elector or trustee. So make sure that you do that. The whistleblower policy basically says if you see anything that strikes you as improper, you have a right to raise that internally first, for example, with the president, with trustees, but you can also raise it externally, and that is your right. And in fact, it's your duty. And so your role of how to be an elector is you can learn, sorry, it's in, I think you can't, it's reverse. But anyway, this is the guide for board members of charitable organizations. It's published by the Attorney General. And this is the December 2022 version, and it's all online. And it lays out what the duties are of board members. And so one of the duties is to be informed. So another is to have orientations, which is why we're doing this. Anyway, so I encourage you to read this. And another thing it mentions in there in terms of this comes up with a whistleblower. If you ever see anything that you think doesn't seem quite right, or even if you just want to learn more about the finances of this board that you serve on, you have a right to review all the documents and records of the organization. It's right in the handbook, and there's nothing wrong with asking to learn more and to see records. So be an active board member and know what's happening with the organization. It benefits the organization, it benefits you as well. You'll be a better trustee and a better elector, hopefully. Okay, the document about financial confidential information, that it's called a WISP. I forget Janelle, do you remember what WISP stands for? Oops, you're muted.
Yes, I am. Sorry. I think it is a written information security protocol.
Okay.
That is exactly it. Or
Yeah.
policy.
Although, as I confessed to Carol in our last call, I am not Bulkley Richardson's WISP expert. We do have one, and she loves talking about WISPs.
Yes. And in fact, Lily is our resident WISP expert, and she knows a lot about it from her prior work. Do you want to say anything more about the WISP, Lily?
It is really a lot of common sense, but with the advent of technology, there's a lot more security issues. Like before, technology is pretty obvious. You will lock the vault, right? But now locking the vault involves so many other things, like a secure Wi-Fi and sharing of passwords, et cetera, et cetera. And it also, an important part of a WISP is the separation of duties, the identification of who can see what, which also makes it clear the things that you need to sign off on and training you might need to get. So for example, if you're handling in Massachusetts, there's a law called Mass 201 CMR 17, which requires that you manage people's personally identifiable information with a lot of care. So you should get trained on that as well if you are the one looking at mortgage records from people and things like that. So it really is common sense. It's just that there's a checklist and we created a checklist that needs to be gone through in the office, and it should be reviewed every year.
Yes, and I believe there's also a form that people, the trustees and perhaps electors also have to sign off on, saying that they've read the WISP, this policy. And so if you're a trustee and you haven't signed that document, you need to do that. And it also, part of the policy, and again, we got this from a template that we found online, the IRS. IRS actually, on the 990 form that I referenced earlier, they ask about things like, do you have a whistleblower policy? Do you have a retention of records, a conflict of interest policy? And we're required by law to have a WISP policy. The others are not required by law, but the WISP definitely is. And the template said that if you're reviewing financial information, you need to have a background check. And so we just established our WISP and we're still in the process of implementing it, but the staff person should have a background check, and anybody who chooses to look at mortgage records. So some people are not as hands-on and they may be fine with just voting in favor of the mortgages that are presented to the trustees. I'm a more hands-on person, so I like to actually look at the data and see who the applicant is and what their financial status is. So I will be, right now we're paused for accepting new mortgages, but I will need to go through a background check if I'm going to be reviewing mortgage applications. And the same goes for applications from beneficiaries, because you're looking at their financial data because they're, saying what their status is. Are they indigent? Because we don't give the gifts to brides for wealthy people, for example. Anyway, so yeah, just be aware of those policies. More trustees could pass other policies, but for now, these are the ones that we have, and it's good to be aware of those. I did want to mention too, in terms of the team of people, so you've met Janelle and you know about the accountant and the trustees, but in terms of, for example, the whistleblower, if you ever needed to go outside of the organization, Massachusetts has something called the Nonprofit Organizations / Public Charities Division. I believe it's part of the Attorney General's office. Is that right, Janelle? Yeah. And they have a website, and they have various, instructions on how to reach out to them. And I've reached out to them. For example, our articles of incorporation aren't yet on file with the state, and I was reaching out to them to say, would you like us to send those? They're this ancient handwritten document from the 1800s. By the way, we were actually established. There's the handwritten articles of incorporation, but we were established by an act by the legislature. And there's even an act on, typically the people who underwrite mortgages have to be licensed by the state, and they have to go through a training, a 20-hour training. And we're in the process of still trying to do the training because it would be helpful for our staff. But there's a law that says that you don't have to be licensed by the state if you are part of an organization that was established by a will prior to like 1900 something, and if you handle no more than 12 mortgages a year. In other words, there's an earmark in this legislative act just for Smith Charities, which I suspect comes from the days of Stan Rosenberg, our legislator from Northampton. In any event, but even though we're not,
sorry, but I have to leave. Just wanted to
okay,
say
and we're just
thank
coming.
you for this.
We're coming to the end anyway. We're
Nice
going
to
to end
meet you,
at 1
Janelle.
hour mark. Thank you so much, Lily. I'll see if
Thank
Dick
you.
has any questions. Dick, do you have
Nice
any
to meet
questions?
everybody who isn't here.
I
Nice to see
think we're
you.
all set. We'll say, Janelle, thank you so much for coming.
You're
and
welcome.
We're out under 1 hour. Do you have anything else you'd like to add, Janelle?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So I'll just say thank you to everyone who watches this in the future. Thank you for coming, Janelle, and thank you, Dick.
Yeah.
Okay. And take care, everyone. And you're part of a very long tradition, more than 170 years of Oliver Smith electors. Thank you for your service, and thank you for taking the time to be informed. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.